Thank you, Ron. The coronavirus pandemic has threatened many aspects of our way of life, but will it be the death of globalization as well? The Economist argues, yes, this may be the end of globalization as we know it. Joining me now is Vijay Vaitheeswaran, U.S. business editor at The Economist. Vijay, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. Let's start with the latest news out of China. We've been covering it a lot during this show, who proposed a hugely controversial security law in Hong Kong that many say will silence the city. So, Vijay, what kind of backlash can we expect to see from countries like the U.S. in response to this move? And how do you think this will put a further strain on trade?
Well, it's great to be on, first of all. Thank you for having me. I was our China business editor for a number of years. I lived in Hong Kong and Shanghai. So I see how the closing of what was once one of the world's great business capitals, Hong Kong, is taking place in slow motion. So it's quite tragic, but it's symptomatic of a bigger change in globalization that we recently put on our cover. I think that there's not much the rest of the world is going to do or can do to stop China as putting the hurt on Hong Kong. That's the unfortunate situation. The US and Britain, the colonial power previously, are too preoccupied with their own problems. We're not going to step in and save the Hong Kong people. And so I think, in effect, that China is going to get what it wants in Hong Kong. The bigger question you're asking is, how does this connect with globalization? For the last 30 years, we had one model of globalization where China was at one end of the pipe, the US particularly was at the other end. And that model of globalization is dead. We're going to go towards something different now.
And we're hearing a lot about this new Cold War with China when it comes to supply chains and, of course, manufacturing, Vijay. Will this make or break globalization as we know it?
I think we're going to see a different kind of connectivity. Now, the way we had things, really companies, American multinationals especially, looked for the cheapest way to make stuff. And it was often in China. And the reason for that initially was labor, but increasingly it was because China was really good at making stuff. In electronics, where Apple makes almost all of their electronic goods through companies like Foxconn and other contractors, we're still going to see the electronics sector heavily involved in China. That's where it's going to be. On the other hand, for other areas, we're already seeing the auto sector make a big move into Mexico, for example, or if they're supplying the European market into Eastern Europe or Morocco. So I think we're going to see what we call globalization. That is the pace at which goods, services, people, ideas connect is slowing down. And that was true. It was true even before President Trump became president. And it's been much more true with the trade war we had with China. The COVID crisis only puts that on hyperdrive. We're slowing down the things that made the world economy go. And this has largely negative consequences, is our view at The Economist.
Globalization, we'll be hearing that a lot, no doubt. Vijay, what I thought was very fascinating that you said that globalization was under threat before the pandemic was even on our radar. Can you explain that? Why is that?
Sure. One obvious reason everybody would know, President Trump initiated a trade war with China. And so we had tariffs on goods from a number of countries. China was one of them, the main target, but we had tariffs on a lot of goods from a lot of other countries. And so that threw sand in the works of global trade, of the free commerce that we had before, and made a lot of companies really scramble for 2-3 years during the Trump presidency, saying, hold on a minute, if we can't simply get parts wherever we need them from our usual suppliers, what are we going to do? And so prices went up. Most of the cost was borne by American consumers. We know this from now we've had a few years of evidence. Economic studies agree that costs of those tariffs was borne by you and me, by all of us as consumers. And but before that too, we were already seeing over the last 10 years the prevailing pattern of sort of one way, get it where it's cheapest globalization had already been reversing into something more like regionalization. So build in Asia to serve China, build in Mexico to serve the US, for example. That was already beginning to happen for economic reasons. And one other factor, if I might real quickly, and that is the Amazon effect. We all want a variety of things and we want them right now, right? That's the Amazon effect. So it increased the metabolism of many industries, and simply having to get stuff from China on a slow boat, taking 40 days to come to the US, that's not a good way to do fast turns on your product. If we think about someone like Zara, the fast fashion retailer, they do very rapid turns, and they often make close to the market where the customers are, and so they're more responsive to demand shifts. And so many industries trying to keep up with the Amazon effect have been bringing their supply chains closer to home.
Amazon changing so many lives and the way we live. I don't have to tell you this, Vijay. There's also been a lot of talk about the EU when it comes to globalization. If so, let's say the union doesn't help some of its smaller countries, let's say Italy. Will it dissolve? And what will that mean for its relation to the rest of the world?
It's a little too early to call the depth of the European Union. People have been predicting that for many decades. There's no doubt Britain is left, right? That's a final Brexit, as it were. And the European project is under more strain now than really at any time. This crisis is showing that these countries are really acting individually. They're not acting together in dealing with the COVID crisis or the economic response. And so this will be a real test. We'll know in a year or two if Europe can survive and if it deserves to survive. But from your question about globalization, Europe is actually more globalized than America. America, for all of our sort of ideas about how globalized we are, most of our trade is actually within the United States. Most American economic activity is within North America and even within our 50 states. And so Europe, on the other hand, is a collection of relatively small countries. So by nature, they're trading nations. Countries like Germany have a much greater manufacturing and export base and a globalized footprint than we do. Europe has a much bigger investment and trading relationship with China, for example, than the United States does. So they have a lot more to lose if globalization declines. So I think you'll find them to be stronger defenders of globalization than America.
Fantastic insight. Vijay Vaitheeswaran, U.S. business editor at The Economist. Really great insight. Thank you so much for being on.